A single vine glowed with an impossible light in the deep rainforest. Elara, a botanist who could hear the whispers of plants, saw it as a direct summons. It was a call that defied her scientific training, a silent plea from the living world itself. She was having visions of a great, ancient tree slowly dying, and this luminous vine was a path to it. Following it meant abandoning her credibility, risking everything her career was built upon. But the vine promised an answer to a mystery buried in humanity's oldest memories, a forgotten pact between people and the planet. By the end of this story, you will uncover the truth of that ancient covenant and how one woman's choice changed our understanding of life itself. What was the secret the dying tree so desperately needed to share? And what would you risk to learn a truth the world has tried to erase? Where do you think our deepest connections to the natural world truly begin? The air itself hummed around the sentinel tree. Its bark was like rough-hewn moonlight, and each pulse of light felt like a slow, pained heartbeat. Without a second thought, Elara pressed her palms against the ancient trunk. The world dissolved into a cascade of silent memories. She saw people in simple clothing, their hands not taking from the forest, but giving. They tended saplings, and in return, the woods guided their steps, showed them where clean water flowed and which plants could heal. This was the covenant, not a written law, but a living bond of mutual care. A sharp, spectral pain shot through her as the visions revealed the bond fraying, the great tree weakening with each forgotten promise. Suddenly, the grove was alive with movement. Figures woven from shadow and leaf stepped from the trees, their eyes holding the cold light of stars. They were the grove's guardians, and they circled her, a silent jury judging her worth. Elara stood perfectly still, her heart thundering, but she let them see her intent, her wonder, her grief for the dying tree. She offered no defense, only her open heart. The judgment passed, the hostile energy softened. A deep warmth bloomed against the tree's bark, and a single seed, glowing with a soft green fire, nestled into her hand. As her fingers closed around it, a searing heat flashed on her palm, branding her with a sigil that shimmered once before fading from sight. The responsibility settled on her shoulders, a weight as real as the seed in her hand. She accepted it, whispering a vow not just to the tree, but to the memory of her ancestors. She would protect this. She would understand. As she carefully tucked the glowing seed into her pocket, a sharp crack echoed in the distance, too clean and deliberate to be natural. Someone else was here. The race had already begun. A hand clamped over her mouth from behind, pulling her into the shadows of a thick fern. The scent of old books and clean sweat filled her nostrils. "Let go of me," she tried to scream, but the words were muffled against a leather-gloved palm. The man spun her around, his gaze sharp and analytical, scanning her face before dropping to the pocket where the seed lay hidden. "I will take that," he stated, his voice low and devoid of warmth. He was not one of the grove's guardians. He was human. His name was Kale, he said, an anthropologist. He believed the seed was a historical artifact, a relic to be studied under glass. "You do not understand what this is," Elara breathed, clutching her pocket. "It is alive. It is connected to me." He made a swift move to grab it, and she instinctively raised her branded palm. A jolt of energy, not from her but from the seed itself, pulsed through the air, throwing his hand back. He stared, first at his stinging fingers, then at her, his skepticism giving way to a flicker of stunned realization. This changed everything. His pragmatic search for proof had just collided with a living truth. "We are wasting time," he said, his tone shifting from demand to grim proposal. "You can listen to the trees. I can rad the bones of dead cities. Alone, we will fail. Together, we might survive long enough to learn why they are hunting us." His words were a cold splash of reality. She despised his clinical view of the world, his refusal to see the covenant as anything but a transaction. But her vision had shown her the scale of what was lost, and his knowledge of ancient pathways was a tool she desperately lacked. With a tight nod, she accepted the reluctant alliance. Their heated whispers were a beacon in the silent forest. A branch snapped, too close, then another. Figures moved at the edge of vision, their outlines blurred by tactical gear. They had been found. "Run," Kale ordered, and they plunged into the thicket, thorns tearing at their clothes as they fled the closing net of their pursuers. They did not stop until they stumbled into the damp, dark embrace of a narrow cave, their breath ragged in the confined space. Safe for a moment, Kale unrolled a fragile piece of vellum. His finger landed on a crudely drawn peak. "The mountain temple of the first guardians," he whispered. "If your covenant has a history, it is written there." The thin air of Whispering Peak burned in their lungs with every step. Kale's high-tech altimeter flickered and died, its screen glitching into static. He smacked the device against his palm, frustration etched on his face. Nothing. The mountain itself seemed to reject his tools. Elara, meanwhile, felt a different pull. The branded sigil on her palm pulsed with a soft, warm light, a gentle thrum that grew stronger each time they faced a fork in the treacherous path. She would pause, close her eyes, and listen to the subtle hum of the lichen on the rocks, the quiet song of the wind-stunted trees. "Follow the light," she would say, her voice barely a whisper in the howling wind. "Follow the life." Kale had no choice but to trust her, his rational world crumbling with every failed piece of gear. Their progress was a brutal test of endurance. The path was a narrow ribbon of loose shale, threatening to send them sliding into the abyss with one wrong move. Then the low rumble began, a deep-throated growl from the peaks above. Kale looked up, his face paling. Avalanche. A wall of white death was already cresting the ridge, thundering toward them. There was no time to run. Elara didn't think. She threw her hands out, her branded palm searing with a sudden, brilliant green light. She didn't command the mountain, she asked it. She poured her will into the ancient, hidden network of roots, clinging deep within the stone, a plea for shelter. The ground before them erupted, not with rock, but with a tangled, living weave of gnarled roots and thick vines, shooting up to form a dense, curved canopy over their heads. The avalanche slammed into it with the force of a freight train, the sound deafening, but the living shield held, groaning but unbroken under the crushing weight of the snow. As the last of the tremor passed, the green light faded from Elara's palm, and she collapsed to her knees, gasping, the effort having drained her to her very core. Kale stared, first at the incredible organic structure that had saved them, then at Elara. All his skepticism, his entire framework of belief, shattered in that single, silent moment. It was real. The covenant was not a metaphor. It was a power as tangible as the stone beneath his feet. He helped her up, his grip firm, his earlier condescension gone, replaced by a sober, awestruck respect. But that display of power had come at a cost. Far below, a man in tactical gear watched a screen on his own device, which had not failed. A large, vibrant energy spike flashed right on their location. He spoke into his comms unit. Target confirmed. The signature is strong. Converge on the source. Pushing onward, guided only by the now steady glow in Elara's hand, they found it. Partially obscured by centuries of rockfall and a curtain of iron-strong vines, was a stone archway, its surface carved with symbols that mirrored the sigil on her palm. As they approached, the vines rustled without any wind, curling back on themselves like waking serpents, retracting to fully reveal the dark, gaping maw of a passage that descended deep into the heart of the mountain. Without a word, they stepped through the entrance, leaving the biting cold behind for the waiting silence of the earth. The air inside the temple was thick with the scent of ancient stone and undisturbed time. Before them stretched a vast, circular chamber, its domed ceiling lost in shadow. The walls were not bare rock, but a continuous tapestry of faded murals, their colors dim, but their stories breathtakingly clear. They depicted early humans not as conquerors, but as students, kneeling before great trees and wise animals, receiving knowledge of the seasons, of healing herbs, of the secret language of the land. In return, the people were shown planting forests, cleaning rivers, and living in harmony with the cycles of life. This was the covenant in its pure, original form. Elara felt a profound ache of recognition, a deep homesickness for a world she had only ever known in whispers. At the chamber's heart stood a pedestal of clear crystal, intricate and dormant. Driven by an instinct she did not understand, Elara stepped forward and placed the glowing seed into a perfect depression on its surface. The chamber erupted with light. Beams of soft green and blue shot from the crystal, weaving together in the air to form a shimmering, three-dimensional tapestry, a living record of the Pact. They watched as the terms of the covenant unfolded before them, not as carved commandments, but as a flowing dance of energy between humanity and the planet. It was a symbiotic agreement, a living circuit that maintained the world's balance, and they saw the consequence of its breaking, a grim projection of the bond fraying, the energy flow sputtering, resulting in the very ecological decay and spiritual emptiness that plagued their modern world. The holographic record then shifted, focusing on a single, pulsing point of blue light on a familiar coastline. A single word resonated in their minds. Waterstone. A deep, grinding shudder shook the chamber. The stone archway they had entered through slammed shut, its seamless fit absolute. A hissing sound filled the air as water began pouring from hidden conduits in the ceiling, rapidly pooling around their ankles. The murals themselves seemed to shift, revealing a new pattern of symbols, a puzzle of interconnected flora and fauna. "We have to solve this now," Kale shouted over the rising torrent, his eyes already scanning the symbols. His academic knowledge became their lifeline. He recognized the script as a proto-language, one he had dedicated years to studying. "It speaks of reciprocity," he yelled, pointing. "The fungus nourishes the tree roots. The roots prevent erosion for the burrowing mammals. It is a cycle. You must complete the cycle." Elara, meanwhile, was fighting a different battle. She raised her branded hand, and the seed responded, its energy flowing through her. A shimmering dome of force erupted from her palm, pressing against the rising water, holding it back like an invisible bowl. The strain was immense, a constant, draining pressure that threatened to shatter her concentration. She had to trust that Kale could decipher the ancient riddle in time. With a final, triumphant shout, Kale pressed a sequence of stone tiles depicting the correct symbiotic chain. The hissing stopped. The water ceased its flow and began to drain away through newly opened grates. Elara dropped her hands, gasping, the green light fading from her palm. In that moment, their partnership was no longer a reluctant alliance, but a forged bond. Peering from a hidden fissure high on the temple's exterior, their relief turned to ice. Far below, a sophisticated base camp was being assembled, swarming with figures in dark gear. And standing at its center, directing the operation with calm authority, was a man Kale knew all too well. Dr. Aris, he breathed, his voice tight with a mix of betrayal and dread. My old mentor, he does not want to study the Covenant. He wants to tear it apart and harness its power for control. The race was no longer just about preservation. It was a direct confrontation. With the image of the sunken city and the Waterstone burning in their minds, they began their desperate descent toward the coast, knowing their every move was being tracked by a brilliant and ruthless enemy. The scent of salt and decay filled their lungs as their small boat nudged the weathered dock of a village clinging to the coast. Here, the jungle met the sea in a tangle of mangroves and quiet desperation. While Kale attempted to barter for a better vessel, Elara found herself drawn to the water's edge. She knelt, her branded palm hovering just above the surface, and sent out a silent, questioning pulse of feeling. The response was immediate. A liquid shadow darted beneath the waves, followed by another, until a pod of bottlenose dolphins circled the shallows, their clicks and whistles forming a complex, chattering conversation in her mind. They showed her images of a razor-sharp reef, a graveyard of ships, and a hidden, safe channel known only to them. Passage was possible, but it required trust from both sides. Elara promised them protection, a vow to restore the balance that poisoned their waters, and in return, they agreed to guide her. An old woman with eyes the color of sea glass watched the exchange from her hut. She approached Elara, her gaze locked on the now faint shimmer of the sigil on her hand. "You carry the old mark," she whispered, her voice raspy like shifting sand. She led them inside, away from prying eyes, and shared stories passed down through generations. Tales of when the corals sang, and the tides themselves would guide fishermen home. From a chest of woven seaweed, she produced a suit that seemed spun from living kelp, supple and strong. "This will let you breathe with the water, not just in it," the elder said. "It is a gift from a time when we listened." Their refuge shattered with the roar of outboard motors. Dr. Aris' team arrived in sleek, professional boats, their members smiling and shaking hands, presenting credentials as marine biologists. They handed out supplies, their generosity a carefully laid trap. Whispers began to circulate among the villagers. Why would these outsiders lie? What were Elara and Kale truly hiding? The trust they had built began to erode like a sandbar in a storm. "We have to go," Kale insisted, his face grim. Now, under the cover of a moonless night, he made a choice. tapping out a coded message on a satellite device. He sent a false report to a colleague he still trusted, detailing a fictitious route up a distant river. It was a desperate bluff, a gamble that Aris' arrogance would lead him to take the bait. It was a gamble they soon realized might fail. As they prepared their small boat to slip away, they saw the dynamic in the village shift from curiosity to fear. Aris men, their friendly masks removed, moved through the huts with aggressive questions. From the safety of the mangroves, they watched as one of the elders, cornered and intimidated, finally pointed a trembling finger out toward the open sea, revealing the general direction of their flight. The hunt was now terrifyingly precise. They pushed their boat into the black water, the kelp suit safely stowed. A soft whistle cut through the dark. Their dolphin escorts were waiting. As the village lights faded behind them, the pod took the lead, their sleek bodies cutting a phosphorescent path through the waves. They guided the tiny craft with impossible grace through a labyrinth of jagged coral that gleamed like teeth in the dim light. Ahead, in the profound darkness of the deep, a faint, ethereal glow began to pulse from the ocean floor. It outlined the haunting silhouettes of crumbled towers and wide, silent plazas. The sunken city of Waterstone was waiting. The water was a silent, crushing weight around them. Elara slipped into the kelp suit, its living fibers clinging to her skin, and a strange calm settled over her as she realized she could draw breath from the sea itself. Below, the sunken city of Waterstone was a skeleton of pale stone, its grand plazas and towers home only to drifting schools of silver fish and silent, watching eels. It was beautiful, and it was utterly dead. Kale pointed toward the city's heart, a wide, circular forum where a strange, steady current swirled in a silent vortex. Resting at its center on a pedestal of coral was a smooth, blue stone that pulsed with a soft, rhythmic light. The Waterstone, but the way was dark, the path through the ruins, a treacherous maze of collapse. Elara closed her eyes, her hand pressing the seed in her pocket. She did not command, she asked. A soft green pulse emanated from her, and the city began to wake. First one, then 1,000, then 1,000,000 points of blue-green light ignited across the ruins as bioluminescent algae flared to life, painting the watery streets in an ethereal glow, revealing the safe path forward. As they swam into the forum, the gentle current around the altar felt like a protective embrace. When Elara's fingers closed around the smooth, cool surface of the Waterstone, the entire city seemed to sigh. A deep, resonant hum vibrated through the water, a frequency so low it was felt more than heard. From the abyssal trench beyond the city, a colossal shadow that had been circling restlessly for centuries suddenly stilled. The great Leviathan, once agitated by the stone's dormant dissonance, now floated peacefully, its ancient rage soothed by the restored harmony. Their triumph lasted only a moment. The dark water above was pierced by the blinding lights of 2 advanced submersibles, their robotic arms unfolding like metal claws, aimed directly for the stone in Elara's hand. A voice, distorted by sonar, crackled through the water. Stand down and relinquish the artifact. It was Dr. Aris. The arms shot forward. They dove, kicking desperately as the metal claws snatched at the water where they had been. The chase was a frantic ballet through crumbling archways and dense forests of kelp, that reached up like grasping hands. Elara knew they could not outrun them, not while holding the stone. It was a beacon, and Aris would never stop hunting it. There was only one choice, a permanent one. She brought the Waterstone and the glowing seed together. A flash of blinding, blue-green light erupted from her hands as the two artifacts fused into a single, swirling orb of living energy that sank into her palm. The sigil on her hand flared anew, now etched with the pattern of flowing water. The power was immense, a roaring river of connection to every living thing in the sea. She could feel the Leviathan's slow heartbeat, the darting thoughts of the fish, the ancient song of the coral, but the fusion also sent out a shockwave of pure energy. One of the submersibles short-circuited, its lights dying as it listed sideways into the dark. The other, however, locked onto her new, overwhelming signal. The gamble had saved them for a moment, but it had also painted the brightest possible target on their backs. The Leviathan, now an ally soothed by the restored balance, drifted closer. On an impulse born of sheer desperation, Elara reached out with her new connection, not with words, but with a feeling of need. The colossal creature responded, allowing them to grasp the rough, barnacled plates along its fin. With a powerful thrust of its tail, it carried them upward, leaving the illuminated city and the remaining submersible far below. They broke the surface near a small, volcanic island, gasping in the humid air. But as they waded onto the black sand beach, Kale pointed to the horizon. A drone, sleek and silent, circled high above before darting away. Aris knew where they were. His net was already closing, and now he knew exactly what he was hunting. The volcanic island was not the desolate refuge they had hoped for. Its black sand beaches gave way to a lush, hidden interior, where a village of woven tree houses stood among the steaming hot springs. The people who emerged to greet them moved with a quiet grace, their eyes holding the same ancient knowing as the grove guardians from the forest. This was a sanctuary, a last bastion of the Covenant's protectors. Their elder, a woman named Anya, with hair like white moss and skin, etched with patterns of flowing water, looked at Elara and simply nodded, as if she had been expecting her. The training began at once, in a secluded clearing, with the sound of a waterfall as their only accompaniment. Anya taught Elara to still the roaring river of energy now fused within her. "You are a conduit, not a container," Anya whispered, her voice calm and steady. "You must let the power flow through you, not fight to hold it back." Through deep meditation, Elara learned to shape the energy. She could project a shimmering, dome-like barrier that repelled falling rocks, and she found she could now hear the chattering thoughts of the island's monkeys from a mile away, a chorus of simple needs and warnings. While Elara honed her connection, Kale immersed himself in the tribe's archives, a library of woven tapestries and carved stone tablets. He cross-referenced their symbols with his own notes, his fingers tracing a recurring motif, a pulsing heart of fire deep within a mountain of smoke and fury. He found it. The final artifact was called the Heartstone, the primal source of the Covenant's life force, and it was hidden in the most volatile and treacherous region left on the planet. Their fragile peace was shattered by a low, pervasive hum that set their teeth on edge. It was a sonic disruptor, a weapon designed by Aris to cause disorientation and pain to any creature with a sensitive nervous system. Birds fell from the sky. The monkeys screamed in agony. The tribe's defenders rallied, but their arrows were useless against the invisible assault. Elara felt the island's pain as her own. She could not stand by. She made a choice. Walking to the edge of the jungle, she faced the source of the sound, a cluster of emitters on Aris's lead ship. She closed her eyes, found the calm center Anya had taught her, and focused. Instead of a shield, she pushed back with a single, controlled pulse of harmonizing energy. It was a precise counter-frequency, a wave of pure, soothing silence that washed over the island. The disruptors crackled and died. The animal cries ceased. For a moment, there was only the natural sound of the wind and the waves. On the deck of his ship, Dr. Aris watched the display, his analytical mind recalibrating. He was not angry. He was fascinated. He had just witnessed a level of control he had not thought possible. She is no longer just a key, he said to his second in command. She is the engine. Take her alive. Everything else is secondary. Elara's successful defense had come at a grave cost. The pulse had lit her up like a beacon on Aris's sensors, pinpointing her exact location. They were no longer hunters tracking a signal. They were a surgical force aimed at a single person. With the tribe's blessing and a detailed map of the volcanic lands now in hand, Elara and Kale prepared to slip away under cover of night. Anya pressed a small, carved totem into Elara's hand. It is a focus, she said. Remember the flow. As their small boat slid away from the black sand shore, the horizon behind them was no longer clear. It was smudged with the dark smoke of multiple ships, a fleet turning to follow their every move. The air in the fire peaks tasted of ash and scorched stone. Their journey across the ashen plains was a trek through a landscape of constant, simmering fury. Geysers of superheated steam erupted without warning, and the ground trembled with the mountain's deep, discontented rumble. Elara felt the land's pain as a sharp, discordant scream in her soul, a volatile energy that threatened to tear itself apart. She knew they could not fight it. As a toxic plume of yellow gas began to seep from a fissure ahead, blocking their path, she did not raise a shield. Instead, she knelt, pressing her branded palms to the hot ground. She poured a wave of calming, harmonizing energy into the earth, a gentle plea for peace. The roiling steam settled into a quiet, thermal mist. The toxic vent sealed itself with a soft hiss, leaving a clear, safe passage through the deadly field. The land, feeling her respectful touch, began to cooperate. Where once there was only a solid wall of rock, a hidden lava tube would reveal itself, its dark mouth offering shelter from the falling embers. When their supplies ran low, clusters of strange orange fungi that could withstand the incredible heat pushed up through the ash at their feet, providing them with nourishing food. Each small gift from the volatile earth strengthened their resolve, a quiet reminder that the covenant was not dead, only waiting for a gentle hand. But the mountain's cooperation was fickle. A sudden, violent tremor shook the ground, sending a shower of sharp, heavy rocks tumbling down a slope above them. Kale shouted a warning and shoved Elara clear, but a large, jagged stone caught him squarely on the leg. They heard the sickening crack of bone, even over the rumble. He collapsed, his face a mask of agony, his leg bent at an unnatural angle. They were trapped, his injury anchoring them in one of the most dangerous places on the planet. Without a moment's hesitation, Elara was at his side. She knew the cost. Drawing on the fused power of the artifacts was like drinking from a fire hose, and to channel it for healing required a focus and self-sacrifice that would leave her utterly vulnerable. She ignored the risk. Placing her glowing hands over his broken leg, she let the energy flow, a warm, green-gold light knitting bone and mending torn muscle. The pain vanished from Kale's face, replaced by stunned disbelief. But as the healing light faded, so did Elara's strength. She swayed, her face pale, the brilliant sigil on her hand dimming to a faint ember. She had given up part of her own vitality to save him. He helped her to her feet, his grip on her arm now one of unwavering support. No words of thanks were needed. The act had forged a bond deeper than any alliance, a silent vow that they would see this through together or not at all. Their progress was now dangerously slow, and their vulnerability did not go unnoticed. As they reached a narrow, natural bridge of obsidian, spanning a river of molten rock, they found their path blocked. 4 figures in advanced heat-resistant suits stood waiting, their leader a tall, imposing man with a cold gaze visible through his visor. It was Aris, chief enforcer. "You have nowhere left to run." The enforcer's voice buzzed through his helmet's speaker. "Hand over the girl and the power she carries." Elara, weakened but defiant, stepped forward. The artifacts within her pulsed with a feeble light. It was not a weapon to be handed over. It was a promise. As the enforcer took a menacing step forward, the ground gave a violent, heaving shudder, far stronger than any before. The obsidian bridge groaned, and a great section of the cliff face beside them cracked open, collapsing inward to reveal not a cave, but a perfectly carved stone staircase, descending into a deep, rhythmic, fiery glow. Heat and light pulsed from the heartstone like a second sun, its rhythm the steady heartbeat of the world itself. Elara stepped toward the magma pool, the fused seed and waterstone in her palm, blazing in response. A wave of pure, primal force washed over her, a trial not of strength, but of spirit. It demanded to know her heart, probing for any shred of selfishness or desire for control. She opened herself completely, offering only her grief for the dying forests, her love for the silenced oceans, and her fierce hope for a world restored. The resistance vanished, replaced by an overwhelming flood of connection. The 3 artifacts merged into a single, intricate symbol on her hand, and her consciousness expanded in an instant. She could feel the planet breathing, from the deepest root to the highest leaf, a vast, living network of which she was now a conscious part. The full authority of the ancient covenant was hers. The chamber echoed with the sharp crack of explosive charges. Dr. Aris and his team stormed in, their movements sharp and practiced. He ignored the floating heartstone, his eyes locked on Elara. He aimed a complex device of whirring crystals and wires directly at her, its tip glowing with a hungry, violet light. "This ends now," he stated. "That power belongs to humanity, to be controlled and utilized. It is too vital to be left to chance and whispers." Elara felt the global consciousness swirling within her, showing her not one future, but 2 possible paths, branching from this very moment. She knew she could not fight him with force. That would only prove his point, that power was meant for domination. Instead, she made a different choice. She reached out with the Triad's energy, but not to strike. She wrapped Aris and his team in a shared vision, They saw it together. One path revealed a world reborn, cities woven into forests, rivers running clean and full, a humanity living in joyful reciprocity with a thriving planet. The other path was a desolate scar of dust and storms, a silent, barren rock where the very air was poison, the ultimate consequence of a covenant severed and bled dry. The vision was so vivid, so emotionally crushing, that it broke the resolve of several team members. One dropped his weapon, backing away with a horrified whisper. "What are we doing?" Another stared at his hands as if they were already covered in ash. But Aris, his face a mask of turmoil, shook his head, violently rejecting the truth. "Illusion," he roared, his voice cracking. "A trick to stop progress." He slammed his hand down on the device's activation switch. The violet beam lanced out, not at Elara, but at the connection itself, a scalpel aimed at the soul of the world. A deafening groan shook the chamber. The ceiling began to fracture, and great chunks of rock plummeted into the magma below. The planet itself was recoiling from the violation. With the chamber collapsing around them, and the violent energy of the severing device tearing at the fabric of the covenant, Elara stood at the center of the storm, the full weight of her authority demanding a final, defining choice. The chamber screamed around them, a cacophony of shattering stone and Aris's device tearing at the world's soul. Elara did not fight the chaos. She opened herself, becoming a conduit for the Triad's power. A dome of pure, silent energy erupted from her, not of force, but of profound stability. It enveloped the Heartstone, shielding its primal rhythm, and pressed against the violent violet beam. The two energies collided, and the scalpel meant to sever the covenant shattered against an unbreakable will. Aris's device whined to a piercing shriek, its own corrupted feedback loop overloading in a flash of blinding white light. The blast threw Aris and his most loyal followers back, crumpling them against the shuddering walls, unconscious and defeated. As the last rock settled, Elara collapsed to her knees. The effort had hollowed her out. The artifacts were no longer separate things she carried. They were her, their symbols now a permanent, living tattoo etched into her very being, glowing with a soft, steady light. Dr. Aris stirred, pushing himself up with a groan. His cold certainty was gone, replaced by the raw, desperate plea of a man watching his life's work burn. "I only wanted to save us," he whispered, his voice cracking, "to end our wars over fuel, to power our cities without poisoning the sky." The power was real. I had to control it for humanity's sake. He truly believed he was a savior. Elara, her body trembling with exhaustion, looked at him not with anger, but with a profound, weary sadness. She saw the path he championed, a world of efficient, sterile control, and she knew it led only to the same desolation she had shown him in the vision. She held the authority to judge him, to deliver a sentence from the planet itself, but the covenant was not about punishment. It was about balance, about healing. She would not become his reflection, using ultimate power to destroy. Instead, she reached out one last time, the Triad's energy flowing in a gentle, inexorable wave over Aris and his team. She did not harm them. She carefully, tenderly, untangled the specific memories, the location of the Heartstone, the secrets of the Sunken city, the path to the Sentinel tree. Those vital truths were lifted from their minds like precious, dangerous jewels, and returned to the safekeeping of the earth. They would wake with only a hazy recollection of their failure, a deep, unsettled feeling of awe for the natural world, and a compelling, unshakable urge to protect it. As the last of the energy faded, a visible wave of renewal pulsed out from the mountain. The air itself tasted cleaner, sweeter. Outside, the violent tremors ceased, and the rivers of magma cooled to solid, obsidian black. Where toxic gas had once seeped, vibrant, fire-resistant mosses began to spread in a lush green carpet. Birdsong returned, tentative at first, then in a triumphant chorus. The land was healing itself, the Covenant's balance restored in a breathtakingly immediate display of its vitality. As the sun rose, its light pierced the thinning volcanic haze, painting the healed landscape in hues of gold and rose. Elara and Kale stood together, watching the dawn break over a world reborn. The immediate threat was over, the artifacts were safe, but their work was far from finished. The silent covenant was whole again, but its whispers now needed to be heard by all of humanity. The world outside the mountain was a different place. It was not remade in a single, miraculous day, but it breathed with a new vitality, a quiet hum of restored potential that Elara could feel in the very air she drew into her lungs. She was no longer just a woman with a gift. The living Tri had pulsed within her, a constant, gentle reminder that she was now the voice of a promise the earth had made to itself. Her first act as steward was not a grand declaration, but a quiet conversation. She and Kale stood before the sentinel tree, its bark no longer rough-hewn moonlight, but a vibrant, living silver, its leaves whispering secrets on a wind that carried the scent of blooming life. The ancient tree recognized its own power returned, and in that silent communion, a new guardianship was born. Elara would walk the world, listening to its needs, while Kale, his academic skepticism transformed into fervent belief, would become the Covenant's chief historian. His role was to gather the scattered fragments of the old knowledge, the myths and folktales from every culture that spoke of talking animals and grateful forests, and weave them into a new story for humanity to understand. They did not build towering institutions or seek political power. Their work was one of subtle, patient influence. In a drought-stricken village, Elara would walk the barren fields, her hand brushing the cracked earth, and the next morning, the villagers would find a hidden, forgotten spring bubbling to the surface. Kale would then share an ancient parable from his research about a community that saved a river spirit and was rewarded with clean water for generations. The lesson was not forced, but felt. In a city, choking on its own exhaust, Elara would spend days in a single park, her presence coaxing the trees to filter the air with impossible efficiency, creating a small oasis of breathable, sweet air. Parents would bring their children there, noticing how their coughs vanished, and Kale would be there with a children's book he had written, a simple tale of a city that learned to live with its parks, not just in them. The change was slow, a grassroots movement growing one healed patch of land, one opened heart at a time. Elara had sacrificed her old life, her anonymity, and a part of her own vitality to become this conduit. She could never go back to being just a botanist. Her personal world had narrowed to a single, immense purpose, but in return, she had prevented a catastrophe of unimaginable scale. She had not just averted a future of dust and storms. She had rekindled a forgotten harmony, a chord of connection that now resonated in the small, daily choices of people who felt, perhaps for the first time, that the world was listening back. The door is now open, not with a final, booming decree, but with a whisper that grows stronger with every child who feels a sudden urge to plant a seed, with every community that chooses to protect a wild place, with every one of us who pauses to remember that we are not separate from this living, breathing world, but a part of its ancient, silent covenant.